I will bring you back. So as you see, 2 years ago, so to the exhibition I curated about the neue Sachlichkeit, the new objectivity, together with my colleague Florian Sander, who's the head of the photographic department at the Centre Pompidou. Sorry, I have to think to adjust it. And I start with the announcement, and you see the title. So Magda has problems to pronounce it, and it was a very complicated title. I think you agree. And you see it, that's a French, but if you translate it, it's Germany, 1920s, / New Objectivity / August Sander. So it is somewhat complicated. The reason was we had a long discussion about the title. Florian and myself, we wanted to call it sachlich, at a German, but our communication department was about to die. Sachlich is really not possible, a German word for a French exhibition. And so there was a long discussion, and then we came up with this monster title. And as we were said, Germany 1920s functioned as a buzzword in France, so we put it in. And in a certain way, it was okay because it was a very sachlich, a very objective title. So it was not a title which now is quite fashionable, like Splendor and Misery of the Weimar years. You find it quite often for this kind of exhibition. But it was not really our aim, because we wanted to reread the history of culture production in the Weimar Republic using the keyword sachlich, and whose difficult translation into other language suggests the specificity of the concept. So sachlich is, as you know, it is translated by objective in English and objectif in French, but it's not the same. The Germans, can you explain? I won't give you now a lecture about the semantics of sachlich, but I will maybe talk a little bit later. But it really suggests there was a sort of specificity of this Sachlichkeit. And our idea was really to dive into the zeitgeist, to really catch the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time of these years in Germany. And we had our choice were across different projects, so bringing together not only painting and photography, but as well architecture, design, film, theater, literature, and music. So it's really about visual culture. And it was never done before, as far as I know, in no country in the world. So there were a couple of shows with photography and painting, but not with the whole culture production of the years. And my colleague Florian Sander, he had a long time the wish to dedicate a retrospective to this photographer August Sander, and in particular to his masterpiece Menschen des 20. Jahrhunderts, People of the 20th Century. And this work by Sander was conceived, unfinished work, it was conceived as a cross-section through the German society, and it was incorporated in our exhibition. So you see here a plan. At the same way, it was like a cross-section, like in German is a Querschnitt, another word which is difficult to translate. It was an exhibition within an exhibition. You see, I don't know, is there a pointer? Yeah, here. You see here the gray section. So this was the space dedicated to Sander in our show. And you have to know, this is our biggest gallery at the Centre Pompidou. It's about 2,200 square meters, and it's an empty space. So for each exhibition, we are working with our in-house architects to conceive a specific architecture for our shows. It's not very sustainable. It's very expensive. But yeah, we are really keen on keeping it because it gives us many possibilities for our shows and even for our visitors, because each time they enter into the gallery, it's a new space and it's completely transformed, and it's sort of magic moment when you enter, because it's each time it's very different. And so here is an idea to give you of the architecture. So sorry, to give you an idea, you are here now, so in the second room, and this is this view. you see here. So you have this long alley dedicated to August Sander with on the grey floor, grey walls, and you have this linoleum on the floor. So that was could distinguish, a visitor could distinguish the Sander part and the Neue Sachlichkeit part. And so together, so these two perspectives opened up a broad panorama of German art, focusing in particular of the years 1925 to 1920 to 29, when Germany enjoyed a degree of economic stability. And going back, so the outer part, so this part was dedicated to the Neue Sachlichkeit, so in 8 sections, which the concepts like standardization, montage, things, code persona, rationality, usefulness, transgression, and looking down. So these were very broad concepts. I found by, of course, doing research, a lot of reading, and I think it's quite important and very inspiring what the literature on literature of Neue Sachlichkeit, and a lot of publication with source texts, with articles and documents on press articles of the time. So I was really reading, and a sort of distillation of all these lectures of all these books and articles I read to find this concept. And these concepts were broad because each section was conceived as a multidisciplinary mix. So there were paintings, drawings, films, sometimes music, together in one section. And this was combined with the 7 sociocultural groups and categories designated by August Sander in his huge collection of portraits. So you have here a better look, so inside the exhibition. So this was the 7 groups, social cultural groups, by Sander, which names farmers, skilled tradesmen, women, classes and professions, artists, the city, and the last people. And then Sander had a lot of subgroups, portfolios within this category. So it's a very huge project. It's an unfinished project. He worked really more than, it never finished it, so really decades on this project. This was not be my topic today, so I'm talking a little bit, but I not dive into really the in detail. It's only here to give the idea of how we conceive the exhibition, because the people were so inside the exhibition, and the people portrayed appear simultaneously as the actors and as the spectators of the art production that was shown around them. So that was the idea, that sort of a gallery, or as Florian told, as a casting show, you have all these portrait people which were actually lived in the 20s in Germany. And here is a closer look to an outstanding subgroup. People came to my door, and you can see unemployed people, beggars, and Sander's interest, and that's really a paradox. I wanted really to point it in typology, so it was about types, refers to the fundamental paradoxes of his approach, which consisted in seeking to represent categories while photographing individuals. So we will come later back to this paradox. You have this will of categorization, but on the other hand, as always, a portrait is always an individual. And as well, I wanted to point out, you see here the showcases. So a colleague made a huge work on contextualizing August Sander, and so that's what very special and was never done neither. So the different groups has this accompanying showcases with a lot of documentation material. And our dialogic structure should emphasize the ambivalence of these years. On the one hand, the fascination for rationalization in the modern age, and on the other hand, the critique of cold, alienating functionalization in all living conditions. or as it put Robert Musil in his novel, Der Mann ohne Eigenschaften, The Man Without Qualities, we have gained reality and lost dream. So that's the idea of my lecture today. So really to give a focus, not only to present the content, but to work about this, to give an insight in this ambivalence of this year by using another title for Neue Sachlichkeit, another translation. Today it's Nouvelle Objectivité in French, or New Objectivity, but at the time when it appeared in France in 1928, there was another title who was given by a French Germanist, Félix Berthaud, and he described the successor of Expressionism not in terms of objectivity, a term he dismissed, but as a return to the cold order. So, and for him it was a transition from ecstasy to knowledge after a high temperature phenomenon, so the term used by him to refer to Expressionism. It was now the sovereign attitude of a cold and detached observation with open eyes. So this was really characterized for him the art of the other side of the Rhine of Germany, so the idea of a cold order. And in the exhibition, we transferred this contrast between Expressionism and new cold objectivity by the prologue. You see here a photo of the first room, the first view of our exhibition. It was around the self-portrait by Ludwig Meitner. You see here a closer look. This self-portrait was a typical expressionistic work, an image of ecstatic energy coming out of the head. So from inside the artist, so from inside coming out. And then there was the August Sander photograph. It was August Sander before the people of the 20th century, when August Sander was traveling, a photographer close to Cologne, and he made this very famous photography of these young peasants just before they went to war a couple of months later in 1914. And the third item was our mechanical head of our collection, Raoul Hausmann, and which was a Dada, of course, which is an emblematic Dada work. But you see the idea already. You have the schematic face. You don't have any individualistic features in this and in the head, and you have the attributes on the head. So you will see it later in the portraits. And of course, the mechanical, the rationalism is always in this in his head. And we arrived very quickly then to the Neue Sachlichkeit, so to the very beginning of the Neue Sachlichkeit. So it was a very known exhibition which was conceived in Mannheim by Gustav Friedrich Hartlaub. And in 1925, you see here the poster of the exhibition and the catalog. And it was a very easy concept in a certain way, because Hartlaub he was asked to provide an overview of the art of his time. So it was easy like this, and then he worked together with galleries, with artists, and we had a lot of documentation around around this exhibition in our show, and we had paintings who were shown in Mannheim in 25. So we have here, we had could assemble 5 paintings, and we put it on the left side, like here, because as you know, Hartwig, as you might know, that Hartlaub made a categorization between the left wing and the right wing. So the left wing was a more verist, more realistic paintings. So with George Gross, Max Beckmann. And then there was the right wing with Alexander Carnold, Georg Schrimpf, with a more classical, more traditional kind of painting. It's traditional, but it's not so classic as you see the Georg Schrimpf portrait. So it's really a play of scale. You have this big baby of the big child in the foreground, and in the background you have this very small horse, and all this is really not so realistic in a certain way, not so naturalistic. And but our main work was this portrait by major work was by Georg Ross, and the Kunsthalle of Mannheim was so kind to lend it, and we will see it in the end of the exhibition in another context. But no, I'm going back and using the word cold to describe the post-expressionistic period. The French critic Félix Berthoud shows a metaphor that was then in vogue among German writers, from Ernst Jünger to Bertolt Brecht, before it became a cliché, particularly in relation to vision, because we had Splendor and Misery in Weimar years, but the Cold Glaze is another title which was quite often used for the exhibition on the Neusachlichkeit. And already in 1922, in his essay, Those Who Wait, Siegfried Krakauer called for a certain coldness which he perceived as a redeeming attitude in a world torn apart. The notion proposed by Berthoud, although welcomed by the great writer Joseph Roth, did not go anywhere. It was not until much later, in 1994, that the German literature historian Helmut Lehten seemed to return to it with his seminal work Verhaltenslehren der Kälte, translated into English in 1922 under the title Cold Conduct, The Culture of Distance in Weimar Germany. And this is a really brilliant analysis of the different social types that prevailed between the 2 years in Germany, a country that sought to hide its shame and malaise behind a cold, smooth, and distant facade. With its definition of 3 fictitious figures emblematic of new objectivity, kalte Persona, cold persona, which was a chapter in the exhibition, I will come later to it, rudder type and creature, the study itself appears to be an attempt to put things in order in the spirit of the Weimar era, a period which was so rich in schemes, categorization, and taxonomies. From Gustav Hartlaub's division of the left and right wings, we've just talked about it, to August Sander's ambitious project to classify an entire society into social categories and groups. So mention the people of the 20th century, the art world seemed to be in the grip of what might be called an Ordnungswollen, a desire to order and objectify individuality, a common desire to distance people and things. On this context, there's a quote from Oskar Schlemmer from his diary. So I read, "If today's arts love the machine, technology, and organization, if they aspire to precision, and reject anything vague and dreamy, this implies an instinctive repudiation of chaos and a longing to find the form appropriate to our times." The recourse of a cold order was thus presented as both a means and an end, as a way out of a destabilizing area and as a mirage of a new society. Not the cold order, but the Neusachlichkeit, new objectivity, quickly became a buzzword and found its way into theaters and reviews. So here's we have here a view in our exhibition. So it's a lot of documentation about theater, plays, and musicals. So you have here sorry, it's still in French. So you have here a look on theater piece by Karl Sternheim, Die Schule von Usnach, oder Neusachlichkeit. So what's in the title, Neusachlichkeit. You have another piece of theater, Neusachlichkeit was the title. And then we have here a review by Michael Spoliansky, a musical Es liegt in der Luft, It's in the Air, which quite popular success in 1928. So you have all this kind of documentation, and we have the text. Sorry, it's in German. The lyrics were on the wall, and we had this song in the exhibition space to give really the atmosphere. And this was a modern comedy set behind the scenes in a department store, appealed to the public with its ability to rewrite the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. The title song praises the fetishes of the new age, such as electricity, radio, telephone, aeroplane, airship, while mocking the values of the past, such as love and sensibility, since this appears to be hindrance of this technology world. In the midst of a new unadorned habitats, man himself ends up being a disturbance. So that's in the end, jeder Mensch, der da ist, der stört. So the human being is really a disturbance into this new cold habitat, the new cold living environment. Conceived as mass entertainment for what Sigrid Krakauer called Pläsierkasernen, pleasure barracks, this caustic performance highlights the dialectic between progress and lost that characterize the new objectivity era, especially during the phase of economic stability between 1924 and 1929. While the fascination with technical inventions was growing rapidly, accelerating the modernization of German society, the negative consequences of this cold order were becoming increasingly apparent. As the German philosopher Peter Sloterdijk writes much more later, I quote, "The Weimar Republic is one of those historical phenomena through which we can best study how the modernization of a society has to pay for. Enormous technical achievement are exchanged for an increasing uneasiness in the unculture, convenience of civilization for the feeling of meaningless." The most vehement plea in favor of this new modern world came, not surprisingly, from an architect, the Swiss Hannes Meyer, who 2 years before joining the Bauhaus published a powerful text with the programmatic title Die neue Welt, the new world, in 1926. Striking a visionary note, he proclaims the death of yesterday's world. Bohemia, Stimmung, atmosphere, the brushstrokes of change are all gone. The author considers the idea of embellishing the real environment with an artist's interpretation as pretentious. Instead, he writes, the home should be machine-like, standardized, so that all needs can be met by assigning equal resources to each individual. From now on, it is the collective that will take precedence. In dreaming of Esperanto-speaking world citizen, the Marxist architect was espousing the utopian impulse, born of the post-war revolutionary upheavals to shape life itself. This objectivation of man inspired all the avant-gardes, in particular the Bauhaus, of which Meyer became director in 1928. The idea of this new world was the theme of our second chapter, standardization. So it started with the Kölner Progressiven, the Cologne Progressive Group, close to August Sander, and particular Franz Wilhelm Seifert. You see here a view in the exhibition. So it started already with George Gross, the new cold housing, and you have this idea of models and standardized types without any human features. So like a puppet, and then we have here as a closer look at this Wandbildnis für einen Fotografen. It belonged to August Sander and was dedicated to August Sander. There was a close friendship between August Sander and Seifert. And we have here other works in this section, and out Anton Rederscheid of 21, so have this very cold composition. You have this architecture in the background, and you see how this painting from 2021 inspired August Sander 26 for a portrait. So you have here a very rare case where the painting inspired the photographer. Normally it's the other way around. And here is another example, and a Seifert painting. And in the section of standardization, so this is the day of this is the event where August Sander and the Progressive met. They had an exhibition together in Kölnischem Kunstverein in November 27. So it's a photograph, and here this was a wallpaper from this photograph, and so I think I've already shown it. So you have here the look into the exhibition. There you have Gernot Arndt, so the 12 houses. So again, very schematic houses, standardized forms. So you have the bar, the bank, the hotel. So always categories and types. And then we came up until Otto Neurath, which is an Austrian designer and thinker of forms and the inventor of the isotype. It's a kind of forerunner of logos and of emoticon in a certain way. So this has all this schematized forms to express society. It was really a way to explain in his works how the economy as well works, but in a very Esperanto-like language with these different images. And then the idea of the New World found a very concrete echo in Frankfurt, where from 1925 the architect Ernst May launched a vast urbanization program involving the serial construction of large-scale housing estates. So the first was the Bauhaus. So we have here with Walter Gropius, and this is here the photo of Turton. You have this serial houses with modular prefabricated structures, and here is a model of the Römerstadt. So we are in Frankfurt, so which was more, if you can say, the Bauhaus was a laboratory, and in Frankfurt really they applied this idea of mass housing, of large-scale housing estates. And here there are photographs of the Römerstadt, and these are all you can see them in Frankfurt. It's still, I would say, are not destroyed. They all around Frankfurt. So have really a couple of these housing long housing dwellings, and so it's still very interesting to visit them. On the ambition of the social enterprise known as Das Neue Frankfurt, the New Frankfurt, there were a couple of exhibitions in I don't know, it's for 3 or 4 years in Frankfurt. So if you're interested in this Das Neue Frankfurt, the New Frankfurt is not so known. It was completely unknown in France. In Frankfurt they made quite a lot of research around this architecture and this even design. So it's a whole transformation of a town in Frankfurt in the 20s. And it was this social enterprise, known as Das Neue Frankfurt, was such that beyond the construction of mass housing, its founders championed the vision of an architecture capable of educating its inhabitants by means of functional and egalitarian housing that reconciled class antagonism. They aspired to bring about the event of a new man as well. So 5 years later, however, the socialist architectural theorist Adolf Behne, wrote bitterly of another housing estate, Dammerstock near Karlsruhe, that, I quote, "Here a man becomes an abstract housing being," ein abstraktes Hauswesen. So it's a play in German, but an abstract housing being. So the ordering of private space into uniformed cells, ordering standard action and behaviors had robbed man of vitality and reduced him to the status of an object. The reification of man thus appears as one of the indirect consequences of these new living environments devoid of human warmth. For left-wing intellectuals in a society under the growing influence of the capitalist imperative of rationalization, the transformation of man into a passive entity became an essential characteristic of his new world, even a precondition of its existence. Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno considered technical rationality to be a fundamental condition of the alienation of society. The cultural industry, by standardizing and mass producing, had, in their view, sacrificed what distinguished the logic of the work of art from that of the societal system. This is Marcel Breuer furniture, so a serial approach as well, but I'm going in standard, and he founded a small enterprise for standard mobile, so furniture, standardized furniture, but going a little bit later because I wanted to present a quote by Béla Balázs, who lived, as we know, as we heard yesterday, in Berlin in these years. So this new objectivity has absolutely nothing to do with revolution, nor with socialism, nor with the proletariat. Quite the contrary. An image of the taylorized world, it was born out of the feeling of big capital towards life. It's the aesthetic of assembly line work. It is the ultimate stage of the reification, which Karl Marx called the greatest curse of bourgeois capitalism. And a Marxist reading helps us to understand the extent to which the achievement of the new objectivity were both conditioned and disturbed by this cold order. The technique of montage, which continued to interest filmmakers such as Walter Ruttmann and writers such as Alfred Döblin for his novel Berlin Alexanderplatz, and we showed original manuscript pages, so it was everything was edited. It was a montage, and the idea of montage was the next chapter, and with a Querschnitt film, so with a film by Walter Ruttmann, Berlin, the Symphony of Metropolis, so Berlin, die Symphonie einer Großstadt, and this opened the section. But I think literature, the idea of editing, the idea of montage is literature in the case of Karl Hubuch, who liked to present his wife Hilde in different postures by cutting up or pasting together this composition. So we have here the drawings, and here he made a painting from this preparatory drawing, and you see here the green elbows. So it was one painting, and he cut it himself in a studio. We don't know exactly why, and we brought them together in our show, because as you see, they're in different museums today, and so it was really an event, and you see it here in our show. And the idea of montage, you see it as well in a more figurative sense with a painter like Albert Birkle, who, by eliminating all relationship between passers-by on the Kurfürstendamm, conceived a heterogeneous typology of Berlin society. All these people, so the rich one, and you see the peasants, they had really nothing to do together, so there's no dialogues. They are really put like this separated, isolated persons in this composition. This is a view in the exhibition space of montage. So we have this masterpiece by Otto Dix, so where all different items put together, edited together in this composition, as is one of our masterpiece from our collection. So you have the Austrian Comte Saint-Genois d'Anocourt, and then you have on the left side you have this was a countess of Vienna, of Austria, and this was a travestite of Berlin, and in the background you have Montmartre in Paris. So it was really completely a montage. It was edited, and you see there is no space in between the different layers. So it's really as a Christian Schad glowed the graph really on this background. So it's very interesting composition. And the same here, it's a photograph. And we have Wollheim, so if I'm giving a little bit because time is running. We had as well this, we didn't have the triptychon, but we had the Großstadt triptychon by Otto Dix, but we had the preparation drawing in the same format. And we have this montage by Sascha Stone, which was not very known. You see it here together. When Berlin, Constantinople, where you have here the mosque, and you have here the Brandenburger Tor, so very foreshadowing because today, as you know, there's a high Turkish community in Berlin, so but it was in 29. And we have all this quite singular montage by Sascha Stone and Alice Next-Nerlinger. We already had a picture from her yesterday. And this is very the first document by August Sanders. So it's projects, the people of the 20th century, and it was really editing for him. It was editing society. So that's a scheme he conceived for the different. You see the different groups he put together already in 25. So this original concept, and you see how it's really very a cold order of this society. And pinned down, and you have here some pit photographs by August Sander, and Here, another one, very famous and pinned down by the cold gaze of the painter that we saw before, or the photographer with the precision of an entomologist. The portraiture receives the same treatment as the utensils and green plants of the still lifes that new objectivity artists like to present in large numbers. So this was the next chapter, the things, die Sachen. And there was always isolated, even when you have here a view isolated, even grouped together, the figures as well as the object in the crystalline clarity of the vacuum come across as a spectrum of an alienated world. And so where doministic things and transformed into commodities where individuals no longer feel anything for each other. And you have here, so the idea was the dialogue between the groups we saw before, and you have here, but it was as the next space, these potted plant, the cactus and the rubber trees, so were very popular at that time. So a lot of paintings. You have here another painting, and here very isolated, very inert, like very morbid, this plant. And here is still another, and this was a view in the exhibition space, and you see as well we had the dialogue with the photograph with Anne Biermann, so the cactus as well, and the ficus, and then the Rengapatch, so this idea of the mass production, and the popular motive of glass, of transparency in the still lives. Here you have wonderful work by Hannah Höch, not very known, coming from Kassel, and again Rengapatch. And then we ended the section with Ella Bergmann-Michel, a filmmaker, and even she has a plastic work where the old people live. So it was a documentation film about a retirement home in Frankfurt. So it's a kind of this new Frankfurt, and there was as well a traveling on this plants, on this cactus and rubber plants. So that was the idea. And Horkheimer and Adorno would later call this lack of human warmth bürgerliche Kälte, bourgeois coldness. This is evident in neo-objective paintings and photographs inhabited by isolated subjects with distant, empty gazes. This was the next chapter, Cold Persona, inspired by Helmut Lehten. So I think this is the first, when you enter in this section. According to Helmut Lehten, the literature historian, the humiliation inflicted by the victors at the end of World War I generated a culture of shame in Germany that was characterized by a generalized embarrassment with regard to the pre-war utopias. So the 1920s saw the appearance of what he calls a cold persona, a new social type that sought to avoid the feeling of humiliation by presenting a cold and indifferent mask. New objectivity portraits appeared to be devoid of all feeling. Subjects featured alone and displayed a detached expression, an absent and even a blank look. Artists were no longer concerned with the personalities of their models, but with the external characteristic, notably their professions. So we have here an example for the collector of porcelain. So he really, his boat had becoming a porcelain in a certain way as well, and his faces was hidden. And we have, this is our masterpiece of a portrait of Sylvia von Harden. You have this blank expression, and the whole individuality is in the hands, and the attributes of an intellectual, of a journalist, and with a cigarette. It was really in this kind of play with the attributes and the model, and we put it together with this secretary by August Sander. So it was a nice dialogue between photography and painting. And there's another Otto Dix, Flechtheim. Yes, as I said, the profession was as an art dealer. This is a view in the exhibition, and the Christian chart built by as he was a medicine, and then Margot, she was a prostitute, and this one, I think, Jules Bissier, so maybe he is maybe the most emblematic portrait of this cold persona, because he is really conceiving his mask of himself. So it's really the game between his work, and it's really very blank and completely impersonal, cold look in this portrait. And then we have this Radziwiłł portrait, which is very scaring because it's 27, so it's one of the numerous 20th century. So Radziwiłł, we know he became later close to the Nazi movement, but at 27 you have this, I don't know, Bavarian type man, and which looks like a prototype of what's coming up with the iconography in the 30s, and it's a proto-Nazi type in a certain way. The bourgeois coldness becomes a palpable reality in the modern environment of bourgeois apartments. So this is the next section of rationality. For example, in those of Weimar Republic celebrities such as Fritz Lang, and Erwin Piscator, so this is this cold, bourgeois coldness, die bürgerliche Kälte. You have this here in the design, and you have this photograph of Erwin Piscator, as you know, was a left-wing theater maker, and so he lived in this very bourgeois and very designed apartment. And then there is another series. It was made for illustration for magazines at the time. This was Fritz Lang in his apartment. And so an interior design magazine praised the techno-functionalist style based on the imitation of machines, but regretted that in these modern glass and metal spaces, enthusiasm for technology had replaced joie de vivre and conviviality. Imported from America, the fascination with the world of machines permitted the entire production of new objectivity. So it really starts after 2024, because in 24 there was a Dave's plan. So the Americans, as you know, at the beginning of the 20s, there was a very high inflation in Germany, and then with the Dave's plan, the American brought in a lot of capital in German economy. And so starting from 24, the economy really raises in Germany, and it was linked to a very high fascination with from always coming from America. So it's biography on Henry Ford, on Taylorism, and so the entire and you see how and you will see in this section how the photograph Albert Renger-Patsch of industrial sites, Karl Großberg's representation of factories, or the mechanized choreographies of the Tiller Girls, which all this really illustrates this fascination for this mechanical capitalistic world. And you see that is a view in the exhibition. So it was a film on the Tiller Girls, this dance group in Berlin, and this is another view in the exhibition. So this is a Frankfurter kitchen by Margarete Schutte-Lihotzky. So we're very happy because we could buy one for our collection, and these are close up to the Tiller Girls, and you see and this is together with an important text by Siegfried Krakauer, Mass Ornament, and Siegfried Krakauer compared the Tiller Girls to an assembly line in his similar text, Mass Ornament, and we have here some pictures of the Tiller Girls. And you see how it works really like a machine, this dancing group. And here we had a wallpaper of this assembly line. And the idea was that the dancers, every dancer in this group, the Tiller Girls, she couldn't see the mass ornament they are conceiving, because you have to look from above or from a far point. You can see this kind of ornament, mass ornament, and the same the worker and assembly line, they do one gesture, but they never get an idea of the whole product. So that was the parallel Karl Krakauer pointed out in his text of mass ornament. and the principle of rationalization soon became a new norm that structured social and cultural life. And she have another here examples, Nerlinger, schnell, noch ein bisschen. So it's really about time, about to work, and as well, Lex Nerlinger, arbeiten, arbeiten, to work, work, work. So this time pressure of this really capitalistic world. And there was another, it was about the interior layout of small-sized dwellings was studied by architects and designers in order to optimize space. Kitchen were remodeled as to simplify everyday life of housewives. So this was here, that's not to, this was the old style of furniture. This was a new style, but in smaller apartments, in this housing, big housing I saw in Frankfurt, I will already present. And then we have here the Frankfurter kitchen conceived by Margarete Schütte-Lihotzky, an Austrian architect. And as I said, we could buy this kitchen for our collection from Frankfurt. There still exists some original kitchen. And here is a closer look, and here is a diagram where everything started. So it was really about to save time for the women, because at that time there were mainly the women who are working in the kitchen. So you have here an old diagram, an old kitchen, so you're walking around, and this is a new kitchen, so you have already optimized, rationalized the movement inside the kitchen. And these are other views of this exhibition section, and I'm going a little bit quicker, and we have this photographs by Albert Renger-Patsch, a fascination of machine, of concrete, beton, Karl Völker, of trains, of motors, and Karl Grossberg, of machine. And you see the date, it's 34, and it's interesting, for Karl Grossberg, there is not a cut in 33, so he was not a degenerated artist, and he could work particularly with this kind of paintings quite until, I think, 36, or really even after the takeover of the Nazis in 33. And again, you have here examples of by Karl Grossberg and Sasha Stone. And for some, however, this cult of the industrial world went too far and ended up bordering on the ridiculous for some, and particularly for Bertolt Brecht, who wrote a famous poem, 700 intellectuals worship an oil tank. So it already said what it said. So Brecht exemplifies the ambivalent relation to technical progress and its functionalist logic. While he mocked factory photographs, you can see here, which he considered failed to convey the social reality of these entities, he was aware that the democratization of culture had made great progress in Weimar society. And so that not least thanks to the emergence of intermediality, which made it possible to combine entertainment and education, music, reviews, and spoken theater. So we are here about broadcasting, radio. In the broadcasting industry, which continued to develop, Brecht was able to make a significant contribution to the development of a new form of culture. In 1927, he saw radio broadcasting, which was becoming more and more widespread in German households, and especially listener participation as an opportunity for the development of a truly democratic cause and a real lever for political emancipation. So the question is, would the Cold Order finally have positive effects as well? So we saw it already with Lihotzky's kitchen, because it was really a project of emancipation for the women. And to literature, going to literature, in a best-selling novel, Gilgi, eine von uns, Gilgi, one of us, Irmgard Coyne, quite a famous writer during the Weimar years, has her protagonist, a young stenotypist, say, I quote, "It's nice to have one's life in front of one's eyes like a well-solved arithmetical problem." And that's the end of the novel, which sees the pregnant heroine leave her city to live alone in Berlin, not suggest that a coldly organized life, devoid of all sentimentality, decided by the individual alone, could be the condition for emancipation. For the writer Marie-Louise Fleisser, a close associate of Brecht and author of a poignant novel about a traveling saleswoman in Bavaria, women just learn to accept the Fröste der Freiheit, literally the frost of freedom. Emancipation was also the new cover motive for magazine, so that we showed here in the exhibition about the woman as driver, as pilot, and as a boxer. So would a cold, objective look at the world help to better grasp the essence of reality? The increasing appearance of effeminate man and masculine woman in the artistic production of the 1920s could thus be linked to the great cinematic success of the Steinach film, I will come later, in 23. In a pseudo-scientific, so this was, I go a little bit further to the Steinach film, in a pseudo-scientific approach that turned men and women into guinea pigs, the highly polemical film presented the mechanism of sexual differentiation while at the same time promoting a rejuvenation process. It is known that it had a real influence on contemporary debates concerning sex change and situation of transvestites. Cold objectivity, even scientificity, seem to have functioned as a distancing device, making it possible to address a disturbing otherness. In reality, despite its neutral facade, the film appears ambivalent. On the one hand, it seems to contribute to a trivialization of homosexuality, which is shown without moral judgment as a biological fact or a social phenomenon, which allows it to be represented in the arts from Christian Schad to John Mammon. On the other hand, the Steinach film reveals the humiliating treatment of homosexuals at the time who were studied like laboratory hamsters. So this ambiguity was the theme of the next chapter, transgression. So it was here, it was here at the beginning. No, sorry, I'm a little bit confused. So that was the opening, and then we have this gallery. So we have here an image of the Steinach film, and then we have this portrait by Otto Dix, which I think he could have seen this film, which was very popular at the time. And we have all this gender fluidity, you call it today. So I have this wonderful photograph with showing Thomas Mann's children, Klaus and Erika Mann, and you don't know who's the man and who's the woman. And you have transvestite, and you have this very strange portrait, double portrait by Anton Rederscheid, and the self-portrait by Kate Dean Bitt, so very masculine. Here's a lesbian couple by Gerd Wollheim, and of course you have this different pictures. And we have here a lot of, quite a number of works by John Mammon, so two women dance together, so it's about lesbian love. So and we had this Bistro for Women by Rudolf Schlichter, and another example, and then you have the homosexual by Christian Schad. And so this is a view in our exhibition, which our masterpiece, was one of the masterpieces, so with Anita Berber, which was the motive of the catalog and of our poster. And we contextualized it in the exhibition with films as well. We have here the gender fluidity and with as men habits, and as an extract of a film where she was dancing in Fritz Lang, Dr. Mabuse, Valeska Gerd by John Mammon, and as well we have here all this kind of masculine way how she presented her in her dances. And then we have a quite ugly theme in the end. It's about sexual crimes, transgression of heterosexuality, and the end of compartmentalization of genders, generated anxiety in some male artists that translated in their works into a violent call to restore the norm. They produced a multitude of fantasized representation of lust murder, sexual crimes, depicting women who were murdered violently with knives or hanged. So you see the murder here in the background. And women's emancipation, particularly sexually, was seen as a threat that this representation attempted to ward off. So was a couple of very horrible works by Rudolf Schlichter, and you as well hear some fetish works again by Rudolf Schlichter. And so slowing the world as it was still an ambiguous act, showing the world as it was still an ambiguous act. And while this approach increased the visibility of those on the margins of society, not only because of their sexual orientation, but also because of their social status within the hierarchical capitalist system, the fact remains that beggars and these unemployed peddlers, workers, or modest employees were still victims, crushed by the steamroller of an omnipresent rationalization, even if they became favorite subjects of the artists of the new objectivity. And this was the last section, looking downward, where you have this as a view in the section, and this is a film. This is first where the workers lives, and it was an extract of their Arbeiter Illustrierten Zeitung, and then we presented the film by Zlatan Dutov, where the Berlin workers live, and we projected on the floor. So we look downwards, very literature on this film, and you see how this Berlin workers lived really in a red hall, and they were expelled by a very capitalist house owner. And around there was these paintings, what called yesterday by Tobias revolutionary objectivity, and you see the Nerlinger as well, and is Schlichter, and you have this Hannah Nagel, so you see the woman in a gear wheel, so they already in a kind of surrounded by a sort of imprisoned in a very that they can't really move freely, though they are really part of a whole motor in the society. And you have this anonymous crowds for the working masses. Here you see by Karl Werker, and again the Nerlinger we saw already yesterday, and you see the people are really transformed like ants. There are really as animals, ants on this bridge going to routes to the streets of the work. And so you have really represented this oppressive environment of industrial architecture, and they're deprived, so here, of individuality. Workers were no more than mere cogs in the capitalist economic machine, like seen with the drawings by Hannah Nagel. And artists also depicted vulnerable population living on the edges of major urban centers. So here you have the family living on the edges, and they're on the edge of the composition. So they are really something very, I think, interesting in this composition of this work by Hans Grundig. And here is another painting which is very eloquent about this period by Hans Baluschek. All these painters were lived in East Germany, they have a communist background, and we have here this summer evening, and you see the working class, the proletarian, they are crammed together in this industrial wasteland. There are no trees, there are no plants. So you have on the left side, you have here the train. So you have noise, and on the right side, you have here the factory. So you have pollution, and you have this housing, everything. It's about. They far from the animated boulevards and the entertainment from which they remained excluded. So I think it's very important to show at the end. So you have this reviews, and where I started with which was and you have this clubs in Berlin, but there was the whole part of the society was completely excluded of this high life, if you can call it, in Berlin of the 20s, of the golden 20s. And August Sander, is still another painting of this series. And you see all these workers going here in this railway station, and really like like robots in a certain way. So there's no individuality anymore, there's no color anymore, so everything is really like machine-like. And again, so this is a canteen restaurant, but you have the impression that it's a prison. And then there have this magnific portraits, drawings by Rudolf Schlichter that we saw already yesterday in Erlinger. And this is a photograph of Hauser, and we arrived in the end. So there was a group of the big cities, the Metropolis. It was the last group of August Sander, and so here is a view in our exhibition. And this is the group I've already shown, the people coming who came to my door, and you have other examples of this last group. You have the musician, the driver, taxi driver. You have here the hobos, and you have here the servants, yeah, I don't know. Oh, so time is running out because maybe I skip the end of the exhibition, and I conclude. Its ambiguity was here at its height. The unemotional way of looking at the contemporary world brought to the forefront those who had been left behind by technological progress, like you can see here with this portraits by August Sander. While presenting them as the subjects of the alienating productivist logic that underlie the cold order. In other words, we can measure the cynicism of wanting, in Sloterdijk's words, to overcome the cold by the cold of art. For the German philosopher, the post-war, I quote, the post-war self is here without a will, and almost inevitably condemned but to cynicism. One of its great expressive attitudes is a cold approval of a situation that says no to the dream of our life. And Sloterdijk concludes, the Weimarianic cynics of art train themselves to play the masters of the situation, when in truth the situation is one where everything is in disorder and no sovereignty is possible anymore. And we know how the cynical game ended in 1933. And thank you for your attention.